it's always nice to be complimented on my beard. I also wore shiny shoes because I was like, I was going to be on the stage. But in all fairness, I think, once you start losing hair, it's not much of a choice, okay? You have to shave it off, and if you go to Google and you actually type in what to do if you're a man losing hair, the top prompt is grow a beard. It's such a stereotype that occasionally when I Google myself, because, when you get into those depressive streaks about existential crisis, you do that. After a while, photos of me just start showing photos of bald, bearded men. So clearly, it's a stereotype. So I was told that I should start off with a joke. I thought I would compliment all of you, firstly. So how many of you are here from Delhi? Anyone who's flown down? Okay, like 2. Well, another bald, bearded gentleman. Lovely. So for the Delhi folks, I mean, the AQI is 110 here, which is amazing. I don't think my body could take it, so I had to go downstairs and smoke a cigarette just to feel at home. And what lovely weather, but kudos to everyone who made it on time. Okay, I heard horror stories about Bangalore traffic. Clearly, you are the blessed Lord, so you've all turned up on time. Thank you. Amma, thank you for the spectacular introduction. I'm so happy you had to do the energy bit and not me. Okay, first, I got to change this photo. It's got a blue tinge for some reason, but, that is what it is. All right, so welcome. Thank you. It's lovely to do a keynote address. I'm just going to, okay, yeah, it's working. Right. So, I thought we would talk about building a skills-based organization with a technology view. I do want to say this up front, though. When I was called about this keynote address, my recommendation was that what we should actually be talking about is what will L&D functions look like in 5 years? Okay, will there be an L&D function? And if it will be there, what would be the skills which L&D professionals and teams would need? But then I thought it might be too doomsday. So, I'll do a slightly toned down version of that. But really what I'm going to talk about is, I think when skill-based organization, by the way, is what everyone is talking about. It's an interesting switch because over the last couple of years, earlier, every conference I would go to, return on investment or return on effectiveness, that used to be the key thing. Then, over the last 3 years, it started changing into L&D getting a seat on the table. Last 1 year, wherever I go, it's tech, AI, and now the new thing is the skill-based organization. So what does it really mean for us? Before I delve into this, because there is a camera, I would like to point out that the views expressed are totally mine. They do not represent organizational views. Caveat made. So let's start. This is something which was told to me by this fantastic stakeholder 6 years back. He said, what do you think is your biggest competition? And I mumbled what I thought was apparently intelligent response. It clearly wasn't. His response was this, and it's true. L&D functions' biggest competition many years back was the internet, because whatever you could create, whatever was considered classic L&D, a lot of that started getting automated very quickly, all right? So the world has changed to now what we are talking about as a skill-based organization. So what is a skill-based organization really? I spent a lot of time over the last 3 months looking at it, doing some research, having internal discussions. There are some characteristics, by the way, which are consistent. A lot of them, by the way, if you also get onto Copilot or ChatGPT, this will pop up. So in all fairness, this is from Copilot, but I edited it for some sensibility. None of this, by the way, is new. The interesting part was, after all the hoopla, when you really get down into the research and the discussion, it's not really new. There are certain things which have started changing, though. So what are those changes? What does it really mean? How does the tech lens apply to all of this? Some of this might get slightly nerdy, but I'm hoping you will all enjoy it. So let's get into this. When you start applying a technology lens to a skill-based organization, what does it really mean? What are the parts where tech has really started changing the game? Can you all see this? Is it big enough? Okay. Needs and learner profile analysis. I've spent almost 23 years in learning and development. I've built teams, I've lost people, I do a lot of work only in L&D. I haven't done anything else in my entire life. I think a lot of learning teams when they actually get into diagnosing the issue, they do a terrible job of it. So, 4 or 5 years back over the last couple of years when people were talking about effectiveness and how do you really measure effectiveness, I think there's a fundamental challenge there. Most learning solutions which are deployed, and I'm on the receiving end, a lot of the vendors and startups and a lot of people come and pitch to me, I don't think solutions are actually designed well. And the reason they're not designed well is that I don't think we do the diagnostic well enough. Well, the thing now is that with tech catching up the way it has, we have the platforms to actually start doing very smart learning needs analysis, very smart analysis of what our learners need. So a chat which I was having with, okay, I can't spot her, but the chat I was having with someone a couple of minutes back was that one big shift which we are now seeing is, at least that's what I am doing now, I am recommending that you start looking at learners not as learners but consumers. They are consumers of learning services which learning functions provide. What does that mean really? It means that now because so much of learning is tech enabled and so much data sits beyond learning also on technology platforms, there is an opportunity to start doing what a lot of financial companies used to do. They would build detailed user profiles. You actually have an opportunity to start understanding what is working for your learners, not basis surveys and what people tell you, because I find a lot of that misleading. There is what people say they want, and then there is what actually works. When you start looking at actions, the tech is now enabling us to actually start gathering data on what is actually working. Okay, for example, do you all do hybrid learning journeys in your organizations? Or you provide hybrid learning services, right? Here is the thing. You can actually start generating, and I don't know how many of you do that, but we do that. We look at data, for example, when there is a learning item which is put out there for people to access. What time and what day in a week are people accessing it? How many people access it but then drop out? How many people actually finish it? If you, for example, give people 3 weeks to finish something, typically you will see a bulk of people finishing it right before the 3rd week ends. So you can start building incredibly deep learner profiles. That has started changing, very interestingly. Second, role-based skills. A classic character of skill-based organization, and I think that's where, at least for us, and I'm seeing a lot of people seeing this, this is a significant change. Earlier, a lot of L&D was tied to the job title, and that's how learnings were mapped. Now, everyone is talking about role-based skills. What do you need to do your job effectively? The weird thing or the interesting thing about that is that that's tied very closely to a very used term which somehow has gotten out of fashion over the last 1 year. You remember a year back, everything was hyper-personalization? It was everywhere. Now it doesn't pop up. In LinkedIn chatter, on roundtables, on conferences, people have stopped talking about hyper-personalization. I don't know why that happened, but I think it stays even, I think it's become even more important now. Number 3, proficiency analysis. This is going to be a big, big game changer. I see most learning ecosystems very weak on proficiency analysis. So what we are doing is we are pushing out typically learning solutions which are pegged to job roles. But the problem is that everyone's got their own individual level of proficiency on the skills they need. Are we able to do very sharp proficiency analysis and proficiency analysis which your stakeholders buy into? You might say that this person is really good at this because I did an assessment. The problem is that does that talk to the end effectiveness, the stakeholder, which is typically a business sponsor, are they seeing that on the shop floor? That has started getting a lot easier with tech. I recently met a vendor who has an inventory of 650 assessments on a range of technology skills, and they can build, and there are platforms now, I mean, we have built, I think, around 150 assessments on behavioral skills over the last 2-3 years. A lot of that has got easier. It wasn't an option earlier. Figuring out proficiencies was a big pain. It's got much easier. And this talks back to what do you actually put out as learning. Real-time skills. I don't know how things are in your industries, but in most industries, we are seeing a shortage of trained resources. Okay? Because that is happening, most HR heads, most business leaders are looking increasingly at resource fungibility. Resource fungibility plays on a very simple thing that we are able to map people's skills accurately. We are able to make it talk to the resourcing platforms, and then we can push real-time skills to people as they need them. That has started getting a lot easier with tech, because now you can create scalable learning bundles, which wasn't the case like 10 years back. The challenge is, do you know what is a sharp solution for a skill set which is very complex? All right, so learning curation we are seeing is becoming even more crucial. Learning in the flow of work, this one is my favorite. In consulting, I can tell you this was the go-to mantra for many, many years. How do you help people learn in the flow of work? Always a big challenge. Classical learning organizations typically identify learning and they push learning into specific windows of time and opportunity. You will do a boot camp, you will have specific schools, all very, very valid opportunities. But what we are seeing increasingly, and I would encourage everyone to become devout learners of the neuroscience of learning, is that if you can plug learning into the flow of work, it becomes a lot easier. Tech has started getting very smart there. Because what technology has started doing is that now tech has started picking up actual behavioral cues which are tied to learner habits. Okay, so I was actually working with a coaching platform, which is a startup a couple of years back. Very smart thing, which now has become quite common, is that they would drive automated prompts which were tied to the actions the people are supposed to take. That science is only getting smarter. And there is a concept of a personal tutor, which I will talk about, which I think is really on the horizon, which is going to be a game changer, but all in good time. Coaching for application, my personal favorite. How many of you are coaching vendors here or coaching service providers? Right, lovely. How many of us are executive coaches? You're trained for ICF level coaching. Okay. That, I am putting money on it that the biggest game changer in the next 2 to 3 years is going to be a complete democratization of coaching. I'm talking about an AI-based personal coach for everyone. See, here's the thing. When you ask me as the Chief Learning Officer, how's the game changing? All organizations are investing more and more in learning tech, which means that when I started off in learning 23 years back, what was the premium? The premium was how much you knew. What was your qualification? Where have you done your MBA? What books had you read? That entire thing is changing because now learning is available to everyone. The challenge has shifted to application. And now imagine if you had a personal coach available on your phone all the time. You've learned something, you're struggling with application. This coach is plugged into your calendar, it's plugged into your performance development rating, your 360-degree feedback, it's plugged into your CRM. It knows where is your next meeting. It's pulling up the data to say, you know what, you're going to have a chat with this CFO. Here are 2 pieces of insight about the industry. Here is some trivia about the CFO because, you know what, network conversations are better. Here is something which you're typically bad at. For example, if you're someone who has to go in for a negotiation meeting, here is a crash course in BATNA. BATNA is a concept in negotiation, right? So real-time application of skills, hyper-personalized to you, aligned with a 24-hour coach who's available to you on your phone. That tech was very, very clunky 3 years back, and I've been watching that space for 3 years. I recently had a chat with someone where I think we are almost there. Now, every time I talk about this, people are like, dude, like I was on a round table and I was saying this and someone said, but Rohin, if we need someone like you as a coach with the fantastic beard and a gravely voice, how do you really get that? Well, that's because virtual reality right now is terrible. Okay? So when you get into a virtual reality setup, your brain knows this is not real. Virtual reality is getting smarter. It is genuinely getting smarter at a blistering pace. So the biosensory feedback is getting better. Okay, I'm going to throw out an existential question which is not on this slide. So we are all talking about L&D and HR, right? Sure, it's a lovely thing. Let me throw out a very different idea for us to examine as HR professionals. Okay. See, we are all here because we need to get better at our jobs. We have challenges we want to overcome. It's lovely. But I offer you an alternate real-world scenario which could happen. Imagine that you go home and now you're given an opportunity that, you know what, you can plug into this virtual reality headset. Your brain will not be able to figure out whether this is real or it's virtual reality, because that's how amazing real the experience is. You can have your perfect world in that virtual reality setup without the trauma and the heartbreak and all the development and the relationship complications, Bangalore traffic, Delhi smog, all of that is out. You are essentially potentially going to exist in the matrix. My large question then typically is, what is the motivation for people to engage in a current societal setup? Why would people want to do a job, get married, go take up a housing loan, get a car? Why? When you could be plugged into a system where you get all of this without all the trauma. All you need is money for the virtual reality setup, your electricity connection, you need some sort of a IV setup for food, and medical insurance, because we fall unwell. So, I'm sorry, are you raising your hand or are you blocking the blinding wisdom coming from the stage?
We don't have to travel and the format would change, but the human connect stays. So therefore, even if when we have a virtual reality world, I love technology. So it is how it is advanced. I'm actually looking forward to the world that we are going to be in. However, the human connect will stay and it is not going to go away anywhere. So I think that is where we will be with technology and the human connect being played. Thank you.
I think that's a brilliant point, but I also love the optimism of the youth. So you're right, that could potentially happen, but I'm going to give you a slightly harsh view also of it. Genuinely sit down and think about it on a bad day. How much do we really value the human connect, one? Secondly, what do you classify as a human connect? When we think about virtual reality or tech right now, we are going with a paradigm that our brain knows this is real, this is not real. Think about the movie The Matrix when it came out. You don't know, your brain does not know from the biosensory feedback anymore whether it's real or not. The temptation to plug into that, I mean, maybe there are stronger people than me, but I would find it very easy to succumb to that. But that's a thought. Interestingly, the fashionable question to ask is that how do you really define the human experience? That will definitely get you a couple of claps in any party, just a tip. All right, so what does it mean in terms of a very tactical level solution design at this point of time? This is a lecture which I keep doing with my team as we experiment with Copilot and other tech. How many of you are actively in learning design? That's part of your job role. Okay, good. For an L&D conference, I was hoping that there would be more people. How many of you review learning designs because you're that senior? So the people who are not raising their hands, what roles are you playing in the L&D conference? Are you all like from other aspects of HR? Yes, the answer to that is yes. Okay, so for those 5 people who have raised their hand, here is a very quick slide. Okay, this is your classic learning design, all right? Theory. So cognitively, how people learn is you show them the theory, you show them use cases so that they understand how the theory applies, you provide them then, give them an opportunity to apply and provide them feedback on that. Sorry, so use cases, feedback, practice, more feedback, and this is the loop which is considered your classic learning model, okay? Theory got automated a couple of years back with the launch of the Udemy's and LinkedIn's and all of the world, right? So what was considered a niche learning skill, research, design, that has significantly gone automated. Use cases view. Use cases view is a very underappreciated stepchild of most learning design. And I think all learning functions should start focusing on that. But now you have the ability, because you have text to video softwares, which are pretty good, and you have text generation or data generation softwares also, you now have the infinite ability to create infinite levels and kinds of use cases. Now that's been around for a bit. I don't think it gets appreciated. But the big game changer which is going to happen now is this. Look at a classic manager upward skill, presentation skills. How many of you have trained on presentation skills? Okay, it is there across organizations. It's typically a solid boot camp, and it's very, very labor intensive, right? Here's the thing. You now have platforms which, when you talk into them, have started giving you feedback on your voice modulation, okay? To some extent, facial expression is generating a report card. What that means is that we now have the ability, and it will only get better, to start creating infinite practice loops which are scalable. You want to train 1,000 people on presentation skills? Not a problem. You want to train 2,000 people on negotiations? Very, very possible. I recently met a vendor who does this very interesting thing, okay? That person can take all of your learning content, all right? You have 1,000 pages of research, you have 100 hours of video, you dump it on the platform takes it all, and within seconds converts it to an automated learning storyboard, which is driven through 20, so that person has got 20 standardized simulations, all right? It builds your entire curriculum, the entire learning intervention, in seconds through those 20 specific simulations, okay? Think about the opportunity that presents. And I'll tell you what really shocked me, and also I think honestly scared me slightly about my job prospects. One of the simulations is that you go into that simulation and you have to teach that concept back to a virtual avatar who asks you questions. And you go through this question teaching loop where it also then gives you a scorecard of how you did. Imagine the power of that now across a lot of the technical topics which we try and train people on. So the tech is changing very, very rapidly. My worry for L&D functions is I don't think we are keeping pace. So here is a recommendation. Don't try and boil the ocean. You will not be generative AI masters. Start meeting up with niche players which map to your niche requirements. For example, for me, assessments is a big area which I want to focus on. Okay, this entire practice loop is very important for me. Implications for learner preference. This is an interesting thing which has started happening. I get a lot of questions around this tech and how it's evolving. How is it impacting learner preferences? One, and I'm going to be very upfront about this, I think social media has done terrible injustice to what learning means. I see a lot of social media posts about learning is creative, it's joyous, and is this amazingly exciting feeling. Yes, it is, when you are not paying attention, okay? If there is, I mean, let's just put it from a neuroscience perspective, right? You're doing something a certain way. Your brain has now got these set paths on how it likes to execute this action, and now you're trying to rewire your brain. It's a fundamentally challenging process. But the problem is that a lot of people are walking into learning interventions believing that, why is it so hard? It is hard because you're trying to build new muscle memory. So there is an entire aspect of how do we educate learners who are interacting with this new evolving learning ecosystem. Now you can throw in, or you can argue that, Rohin, if you gamify it, if you position it well, I'm all for it, okay? Gamify it, position it, but there has to be a basic appreciation of this concept called the growth mindset, which learning organizations need to focus on. That learning does require a certain amount of grind. It does require you to solve for problems, to get better. Number two, the concept of mastery is shifting. This one is interesting. When we started off, we means that people who started 20 years and above, you know, you were supposed to have mastery. I mean, you would go in and I would stroke my beard and say, you know what, 10 years back I had seen this and stuff. That entire thing has shifted. Like for example, I encourage my team members when we hire them to typically enroll for a 2 years Masters in Psychology program. Okay, so a lot of my team members are Masters in Psychology, so am I. But the thing is, you don't need that MSc in Psychology anymore. One, I would be very worried about how dated that content is. But the second piece is that you don't need to know the entire field now to apply in certain domains. That concept of application does not require as much mastery as it used to. Now, the interesting sociological aspect of it is that mastery is not as exciting as it used to be for a young learners. They don't see the glory in the grind, and I have spent 5 years understanding this, then they are like, dude, you're very slow. There are smarter ways of doing it. So if you're pitching mastery as the pull, might not work as well. Expectations of user experience have shifted. This one, a lot of organizations struggle with, which is, are you all HR qualified? I mean, you've done your MBA in HR, you are HR folks, all of you, right? Now here's the challenge. We are all HR folks, and we are designing or working with technology platforms where user adoption is driven by the user experience. The user experience for most people on tech platforms is when they compare it to an Insta. Like, because that's how intuitive Insta is. Anything which is not that intuitive is clunky. So the problem is that if you're bringing in tech, but you haven't figured out a seamless user experience, you got a problem. Learners do enjoy the human connect. I concede. Yes, we do, as of now. The trade-offs are tougher though. Earlier, like before COVID, most training was in person. Now it's shifted to hybrid. I would bet that as the virtual reality experience gets more economical to be deployed at scale and tech gets better, the jury, I think, is going to be out on what would learners prefer. But again, the jury is out. So let's see how that works out. What does it mean for learning functions? I'm a big propagator of that. I think we need to start looking at our learners as consumers of learning services. Start building deep learner profiles. Do you understand what your learner likes? Which day of the week they learn? What kind of medium do they like? What day in the week and what time on that day do they like to learn? Each of these learners has an individual profile. They respond to different rewards, motivations, or sticks. You now have the ability to start building segregated, hyper-personalized, how should I put this, follow-up models. For example, someone who has finished 30% of the curriculum which you have targeted within the first week needs a different follow-on strategy from someone who has finished 80%. The same mailer is not going to work for everyone. The same rewards are not going to work for everyone. So, learners as consumers, credit card companies do a fantastic job of it. They build these deep learner profiles and then they have very targeted reward mechanisms. Do you know that? So, learning behavior models, super important as an area for us to get into. The challenge is most of us don't have a mindset for data or stats because we are a bit groomed in psychology, classic human resources. So there is an entire skill shift which is happening for learning functions for sure. Number 2, generic learning activities are getting automated. Learning pyramids or learning team pyramids now are clearly seeing a scenario where middle of the pyramid jobs, drafting, research, assertiveness training, time management, a lot of these bread and butter things have gone out. And with ChatGPT, Copilot, and platforms like these coming in, you have an opportunity to really lift your game. Okay, so what I am seeing now is that learning functions need to focus on the bottom of the pyramid activities, which is you have a great plan. Are you able to efficiently, operationally deploy it in an organizational ecosystem? So how smartly do you run the ops? That's one. Secondly, how well do you gather the needs from the different platforms? So there is a bottom of the pyramid work, middle of the pyramid work is getting automated. Then you have top of the pyramid work for an L&D function, which is how do you ensure that the learning solutions are then integrating into the strategic and the culture fabric of the organization, because that's really where effectiveness sits, which ties back to the earlier question of how do you get a seat on the table. Businesses don't care whether you use ChatGPT or not. What they care for now is that there are all of these tools available. Can you solve my business problem smarter, more effectively, in a shorter span of time? So one recommendation I have for my team, and I'm going to make it to all of you, is let's not be afraid of experimenting. Like what I tell my team is, listen, if it's worth going after, let's go after it. All right? We'll figure out how to make it happen. Because now that learning curve is a lot easier. Whatever you need to learn, or at least the first draft of a solution, can be done by an automated platform. So you don't need to learn from scratch. I think that should be a liberating thing for us. Go after things which matter now because we have the tools to make it happen. But it won't happen if we think that, oh, we're too old or tech is complex. It's not. You just need to spend enough time understanding the broad concepts of tech, but meeting up with the people who are doing special things. AI is already doing some of the strategic activities, all right? So that has already started happening at an ecosystem level. This is an interesting thing. I do a lot of conferences and roundtables. What we are typically seeing as a pattern is that learning hours, average learning hours at an organizational level typically are going up. Because self-paced and virtual learning platforms have made learning very easy for everyone. The problem now, or the question which is coming up is that are they working? Are they effective? So that's a question which you need to start answering. So what does that mean? It means that we need to ensure that we are training our learners on how to interact with this learning ecosystem. So learning agility and growth mindset, slightly old school, becomes super important. I'm a huge fan of VR. I think it's terrible right now, but it will get better. When it gets really good, it will significantly impact the market. My time's up, but I'm almost done. What do I recommend? I think we need to start getting closer to the job roles. I think we need to start moving away from a stratified learning ecosystem and start understanding the job role and the workflow much better. Again, use tech for that. Dynamic planning cycles, because I don't think a 3-year planning cycle works. Have a 1-year plan, but do 3-month reviews. Breaking up job roles into skill sets and then mapping learning bundles, smarter way to do this. It will also eventually feed into resource fungibility, which is typically a solid metric for most business stakeholders. Okay, this is a personal pain point for me. I have a request for everyone as someone from the fraternity. Let's make sure that what we are putting out there, right, we know it will work. So my standard question is, are you proud of this solution when you're putting it out there? Because that's the litmus test question of, do you have some faith in this? I have been saying this for the last couple of years. I don't see a reason to change it. I think HR and learning functions need to become students of AI, learning science, consumer psychology, marketing, and change management. If you go onto my LinkedIn profile, you will actually see that I've got a postgraduate certificate in digital marketing. I have a MSc in psychology. I have a certification in change management. And we have done a lot of stuff with that. Why? Because, again, learners as consumers. Change management, because you need to integrate your learning into the organizational ecosystem. Last slide, crystal ball views. I love this one because God knows what's going to happen with the future because tech is changing so fast, but here is what I am putting money on. Number 1, learning team pyramids will dramatically change. Okay? It's already happening. It will continue to happen. I don't know which pace or where are we going to end up, but whoever your people are in your teams or if you're heading functions, please look at your utilization and the value coming out. Number 2, VR will be a game changer. Yes. Biosensory feedback will get better. Your brain will get confused. The question is, how well do we use that? Number 3, this is, I think, the holy grail, an integrated personal tutor. Someone who's with you, which I spoke about earlier, right? When that happens, and I want to see if there's anything else. No. When that happens, here is what the end point is. Smart thinking is going to be available to everyone. So the differentiation between what school, college, background you're coming from, your earlier experience, all of that is going to start making less of a difference. because tech will even out the playing field, and that will feed into the entire concept of I&D, equity. All of that is going to get better because tech is going to make it easier. So to wrap it up, ladies and gents, we need to get ahead of the tech. My big fear is we are not. So experiment, but if you want to experiment, then fail quickly. You can't afford to go into a 1-year testing cycle. Identify a tool, test it, do a 3-month testing, and get out. Either use it or get out of it. Don't hold on to it. On that merry note, I know I have no time for questions and answers, but I'm around till 3 o'clock. It was lovely to meet all of you. Thank you for your patience. I hope you're not stunned into silence, and welcome to the conference. I hope you enjoy your next